Hello, this is episode 12.2. So, last time where I left off was um, I was taking a road trip with my mom because uh, she had to uh, do this. She was doing her research and across uh, all schools in Andhra Pradesh, and she had gone to various schools on her own in Hyderabad and other districts like Adilabad, Warangal. She had done all that. But now we are going to cover four cities: Vijayawada, Visakhapatnam, Guntur, and Nellore. So last time where I left off in 12.1 was basically we had gone to Vijayawada. We went to this missionary school, and that's where we were going to do. And we had checked into a hotel the previous night or in the wee hours of the morning. So and then we got a couple of hours rest. My dad had arranged for a car because until Vijayawada we had gone in a bus, and from there we were actually going to travel by road to all these towns. Just the two of us with the driver. Pretty brave. And back then the highways were not so well laid out or well maintained also, actually. So um, so we went to this Vijayawada school, and my mom had an appointment with the principal. So she and I went into the principal's office, and she had to explain her whole research and get the principal's buy-in. Because there were no phones back then, there was no way to communicate ahead of time other than through a letter. So she had to say, okay, there's like this free period, so I need these many kids. So she had to do a whole, half an hour of explaining what her research was about. And then and the principal was challenge her. Oh, I'm not sure, how about this, how about that, and then she would explain all of that. And then after she got the principal's buy-in, she'd be allowed to go into a classroom. And then in the classroom again, she would explain to the class what they need to do. They should explain the questionnaire. In the missionary schools, they would listen, they would do it. But in some schools, the students kind of were unruly. Like they would, not finish it properly, or finish it ahead of time, or make too much noise. Sometimes the class teachers helped, sometimes they didn't help. And usually, like, I would sit with them and do it, even though I had done it several times, just to show. And then I would hand the questionnaires out. So we covered one school in the morning in Vijayawada, this missionary school. Then we stopped somewhere for lunch at a meals place. Just my mom and I, we quickly grabbed some lunch there. And then she gave some money to the driver to get his own lunch. And then we went to another school in the afternoon. So after that, we had this whole bunch of questionnaires with us. We came home and she sorted them all. She corrected as many as she could, and she gave me the answer key, and I corrected some. And after that, we went downstairs, and we got told the hotel to get us some food. So they got packed some idlis or something for us. We had that. And then we went to bed. The next day was a long day ahead of us, because from Vijayawada, we were going to travel to Guntur, and we would basically repeat the same thing over there. So very early in the morning, like around 5 a.m., we had to check out, we had to get ready, and we had to cover all these in very short time. So we had to get ready. And then after that, we sat in the car and we started driving towards Guntur. And again, we reached Guntur. We had to cover two schools there, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. Same thing, same model repeat. my mother would go talk to the principal, and again the principal was like, they would always challenge her. They would always, like, by challenge I mean they would not just be so cooperative right away. They'd want to assert themselves. They'd ask a bunch of questions, and my mother, with great patience, she would explain herself, and this whole process would take half an hour. Then they would say, okay, you can do that. They would assign 2 classes, and they would say, oh, only when they have a free period, they have an exam coming, they have an inspection coming. So she'd have to wait until they allocated her time. Then she would go to these 2 classes, again explain to all the kids what her research was. I would hand out the questionnaires. And then in the afternoon, we'd again go somewhere to a hotel, to a meals place, just grab some meals, just the two of us. Ladies, we'd just sit I mean, they didn't have, as strange as it seems, as it sounds, they didn't have, in many of these towns, they didn't have nice restaurants. They only had like these kind of like down market, like meals places. So only men ate there. So at any given point of time, we were the only 2 ladies eating. So she, but my mother was very bold. She didn't care. Like, she made sure that I was well fed, and she fed herself. And then in the afternoon, and the driver too. And then in the afternoon, we'd go to another school. Then again, the same thing repeat. Half an hour she had to explain herself to the principal. Then come back home, bring all these questionnaires, and then she would sit and correct all of those. I would help with a few. I would correct as many as I could, and then and she would correct all of those. She would compile all of that, and then tie them up, neatly. Guntur, I remember. For dinner, though, we didn't come back to the hotel. After we finished the 2 schools, my dad had arranged dinner at his friend's place. And this friend was actually a business associate. He was a very, very powerful distributor. Actually, in Guntur, he was the lead distributor in Guntur. His name was Babu, and he was very roly-poly, and he had this like very pleasant face. And he was a big fan of my dad. Like, so always when my dad was working for Diwali, for Dasara, like he'd send a bunch of fruit, basket of fruit, gifts, everything. Like, not gifts as in gifts, but it was usually fruit or dry fruit or sweets from Guntur. But the thing that we valued the most from Guntur was the Guntur avakaya. So Guntur avakaya is actually different from other parts of Telangana avakaya, or even other parts of Andhra avakaya. So recently the movie came Guntur Karam, but actually Guntur chili powder, Guntur chilies are some of the hottest chilies in the world. It is not the hottest. Of course, there's a ghost pepper and things like that, but out of the dried red chilies, they're one of the hottest in the world. And definitely chilies from Andhra Pradesh, red chilies from Andhra Pradesh are the hottest, one of the hottest in India. These Kashmiri chilies are not so hot. The Degi mirch, they're not that hot. They're hot, but they're not that hot. But the Andhra chilies are very hot, and amongst the Andhra chilies, the Guntur red chilies are extremely hot. And what's different about these Guntur pickles is the Guntur karam is very fine. It's misleading. It's not very granular. It's very fine, almost like a soft powder. And it's little orangish in color. It's not bright red like this, like a t-shirt. So it's very misleading. You would think it's not that hot. It's almost like tandoori masala color. It's like crimson orangish red color. It's not a deep red. It's not like other chili powder, sour. But it's very, very, very hot. So what he would get us is, once he got his pickle from his home that his mom had prepared, we got so enamored by the texture of it, because it's not like usually in our homes when they make avkaya, especially in Brahmin homes when they make avkaya, it's a little bit granular in nature, and it's not so smooth like a gravyish like thing. But his pickles were very different. They were very like, almost like a liquidy, like they had a flow to it, and they tasted so good. So every time he came, we would be eagerly waiting for where to eat that Guntur avakaya. That is, and next time onwards, my mom and dad told him, don't get us any fruit, just get us the avakaya. Just get us your avakaya. So every time he came, he would get us the Guntur avakaya, and we would look forward to it. And Babu was very close to my dad. He was a very good friend. He had become a good friend from a business associate. So he had arranged for dinner at his home, and for sure he had gone to Ravakaya. He actually wanted to pack some and give it to my mother, but it was too much to carry. But she didn't want to say no to him, so she took that as well. So now we had the avakayas also to carry, and they had so much oil. You had to be really careful, otherwise all our clothes would get damaged. So we had dinner there, and we came back in Guntur. I remember that. And then next day we headed to Nellore. And Nellore also, same thing. She had to go to the school. And here she didn't have to do so much selling. They knew she was there from the city, so they gave her a lot of respect. And she could get her the 2 schools done. And then we stayed overnight in Nellore. And the next day we left really, really early in the morning to go to Vishakhapatnam. Now, Vishakhapatnam is very, very, very far off from Guntur, Nellore, that region. So it was a whole day road trip, and we were going by road. We were not going by train or anything. So we had to leave really early in the morning, like 3 a.m. or something like that. We checked out, and then we traveled. So around 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, we packed lunch because there was nothing, back then the highways didn't have rest stops, good rest stops and all like that ladies could go to. Like 2-3 times I remember we had to stop for the bathroom. And I remember traveling with my dad, it was so easy. They would just go wherever, they didn't even have to think. But we had to look for shrubs. We had to look for and there was nothing. There was no shrubs or nothing like on the way there. There were only like rice paddy fields as we approached Visakhapatnam. But before that, not even. They were just like dry, arid areas. So we had to just literally stop on the highway and find a shrub, and my mom would hold guard for me. I would go to the bathroom, then I would stay guard, my mom would go to the bathroom. And I realized, seeing all this, how difficult it is for a woman, how very, very difficult. And then finally we reached Vizag. We reached Vizag. So by the time we reached Vizag, it was evening. We checked into the hotel. We were staying in Dolphin Hotel actually. So we stayed there, and next day morning we went to Andhra University. Because Andhra University, somehow, I don't know why we went there, because I think there was an annex or there was a junior college over there on the premises or something, where it is considered 11th and 12th, technically high school. Because I don't know why we went to a college, but I remember this experience very, very, very distinctly. So my mother went, maybe she knew somebody there. So how ironic, Andhra University is my great-grandfather, Visapparao Garu, was one of the first vice chancellors of Andhra University. In fact, I think he was the first vice chancellor after independence of Andhra University. So basically, we went there, and of course, I've told you in earlier episodes, episode 3, episode 5, how much I loved Vizag. I never would say no to go to Visakhapatnam. It was my favorite city. So my mother, she left me in the car, and she said, we didn't give questionnaires. She had to talk to somebody. She was going to meet somebody in Andhra University who was going to give her contacts of schools. Okay. So she left me in the car, and she went inside to meet somebody, to meet that person who will give her contacts. And I distinctly remember this was when I experienced my very first eve teasing incident. Okay. And so until then, I had never gotten eve teased, as in nobody had. For the American kids who don't know what eve teasing is, they harass. They harass young women in India, like, the used to. I think it has reduced significantly, but it was, when I was growing up, it was terrible. So it used to start right around this age, and it was strange because I just hit puberty, like, just a couple of days ago. And here you go, I was already experiencing my first eve teasing incident. And these were all college boys, and I was only a school kid, even though, I hit puberty, I was only 12. Like, I was like, significantly younger than these college boys. Okay. So, but because I had no idea, it was my first experience being eve teased. I didn't know what that felt like. I didn't know how that was. Of course, after this incident, until I left India, like literally every day I had to experience at least 3 to 4 eve teasing incidents. It was just a way of life. So I very much knew what it was, but this was the first time. That's why I remember it. So, so I rolled down my window, and I was just sitting there. I was just like looking outside, observing. I was a very observant kid. So I was observing people. I liked people watching. So I was watching the people, the students. There was a group of young men standing there, boys, college boys. And, I was observing them also, but I was observing everything. The girls, I was just generally observing. Then two of those boys came to the car. The driver was in it, and they just started talking. So I just thought of them like an uncle, like, not an uncle, but definitely not my age group. They were college boys. So they said, what's your name? What are you doing here? Then I said, my mother is a lecturer. She's doing some research. And they were very polite. They were very well spoken. Like, I didn't realize that they were going to harass me eventually. So they were very polite, and they were saying, is it your first time in Vizag? So they were very friendly. They were very nice, actually. Then suddenly, this young man, he says, you have some hair over here, on here. Then I felt so awkward and very embarrassed and very icky. Like, it was weird that he was saying that. Then he said, oh, do you have a mustache? Are you growing a mustache? I think you're growing a mustache. And it was not funny. It was I felt very harassed. Then I said, oh, okay. And I just tried to cover it. Then he said, do you have hair growing anywhere else, or something like that? I was like shocked. I was really, really shocked. And I felt very violated. I felt very icky. And it was my first incident. I knew what harassment felt like. So I literally felt harassed. So I just withdrew. I just didn't reply, closed the window, and I just wanted to hide, and I wanted to run away from there. I felt really, really bad. And I think I cried also. I cried a lot because I felt very icky. So, anyways, then my mother came, and I saw my mother coming. I didn't want to trouble her. So I didn't tell her anything. I just wiped my tears, and I became okay. And then, so that was then, yes, indeed, that contact of her had given her 2 more schools' addresses, and we went to those schools. We finished them. And then we had all these questionnaires and all of that. And then we flew back. We actually had flight reservations, and we flew back. So, in a way, this was, in more ways than one, it was a coming of age trip for me. trip for me. Usually, like, they say that when somebody enters their teen years, so basically, we're going to turn 13 very soon, actually, within a few months of this trip, within a couple of months of this trip, actually. But they say, like, during teen years, people are very confused, and they're, like, trying to understand their everything is changing, their bodies are changing, they have emotions that they can't explain. Like, that's how puberty, or that's how teenage is described. For me, I can't relate to any of that. For me, it was truly coming of age in a different way. And I'll tell you in which way. So I'd gone on the road trip with my dad, and I saw how different his work life was. Not in the kind of profession, of course, even a different profession. My mom was in academia, and then my dad was in marketing and sales for a private. I'm not talking in that sense. Even when my dad did the road trip, not everybody knew him. When he went to these various organizations, of course, he was a big shot, but so was my mom. She was a lecturer in Usmania University, and she was very well educated, she was very well spoken, and she was doing her PhD research. But somehow my dad never had to go and explain himself and sell it, and would be so challenged. Everywhere my mom went, like, she'd be challenged. She'd have to again start from the beginning and prove her credibility. Prove that, like, okay, I know what I'm doing, this is how I'm doing it, and convince. Everywhere she had to start all over again, this convincing. I never saw, like, my dad or other men do that. Like, they somehow, they just take command and everybody just listens to them. But so I realized, I think for me it was a coming of age, in that seeing how hard my mother worked. Then there was never any rest. Like, my dad would work in the morning, and then he had a large team working for him. My mother didn't have any team working from her. She was all alone, and she was just managing everything. Like, she was a one woman show. She was just managing everything by herself. She didn't even have anybody to carry all those bundles, like even doing the physical labor of that. And but still she successfully did all this sampling. It was so hard. And just the road trip, even something as basic as, going to the bathroom, we didn't have facilities. We had to struggle. We had to, like, nothing was for granted, like, for her. Everywhere she had to go, she had to prove her credibility. She didn't know, like, whether they would accept her. She would have to take what slot is given to her. Then she would have to carry everything. Even when we were eating, it was so uncomfortable. Like, all these restaurants, like, there were no women. Like, I realized how difficult, if a woman wants to do something, she has a dream or a goal or an ambition. It's not very easy. It's many times, it's twice, thrice, 10 times as hard to navigate that, her pathway towards her goal. I think most of her time, like, everything was so hard. In a restaurant, it was so uncomfortable, everybody staring at us, and we are just sitting there and eating. And then she also has to take care of, her child. She has to, make sure. She was always worried about how, my sister, whether, of course, my dad was an exceptionally good parent, so I don't think she was worried from that aspect. But still, she had, like, two kids at home, and then one kid with her. And then I noticed how, my mother had literally just left me, literally for 20 minutes, maybe 15-20 minutes in that car. And I already had an Eve teasing incident. So what I realized through all this is, I realized I got a tremendous amount of respect for my mother for doing all this. Of course, I very much always respected her or anybody for doing a PhD, right? There's no doubt about it. But what all hurdles she has to navigate, and apart from just studying for a research, she just couldn't just study for a research and just do the PhD and that's all she could focus on. She had 100 other things that she had to navigate. Like it was like this whole, you know, other things that she had to navigate that had nothing to do with her research. But again and again, I saw the same model repeating, navigating just to eat food, which restaurant, which restaurant, half the restaurants, the men would stare at us, we wouldn't feel comfortable. Where do you go to the bathroom? Basic things like that, like food, going to the bathroom, shelter, what time do we travel? Like, I remember when my dad traveled, we would travel during the night, no problem. Yes, it was an Naxalite area, so as we would reach, but we couldn't travel in the middle of the night like that. So we had to literally travel like there were only specific times we could travel. There's only specific hotels we could stay in. We couldn't just like pick up something and just do it. So I realized one thing. I had a tremendous amount of respect for not just the fact of how hard my mother worked, but how much she had to navigate to get where she did. That she had to work twice as hard as any other man or to get where she did. And there's something else that I realized. My mother would keep telling me all my life, if you remember all the episodes, that I have to be bold, I have to be bold, I have to get a haircut, I have to be bold, I have to be courageous. Um, I never understood what that meant. First of all, I was a very girly girl, so I would always misunderstand boldness to be, at least the way she described us, as tomboyishness. So, because I was a very girly girl, I didn't want to become like a man. If being bold meant like, bashing up men and, having a boycott, I didn't want that. I enjoyed being a girl. I still do. In spite of all the hardships, I would never give this up. Because there's a grace and there's a nurturing aspect and there's many aspects of being a woman that I wouldn't give it up. All the hardships are worth it. But so I would not understand what does she mean by bold. But after watching her, really after I came back, it was overnight. I kind of realized what I had to be to survive in this world. I knew that I had to be courageous. I had to be courageous. Otherwise, it was not possible for me back then in India to achieve any of my dreams, or forget dreams, even living up to my values. I would not be able to do that. I realized that to do all this navigation, I realized that my entire life from now onwards would be like that. And it was much worse than I imagined, actually. From that point onwards, I kind of stopped being a kid and I became a woman in my head. I'm not talking physically. In that, I realized that there are some special qualities that I have to develop. Otherwise, I won't survive. I will survive, but I won't thrive. And I didn't want to just survive. I wanted to thrive. I wanted to fulfill my dreams. I wanted to have the right to dream and I wanted to fulfill my dreams. I wanted to live up to my own values, live up to my character, live up to my personality. And none of that was possible, at least given the scenario as a woman, without courage. So, and I didn't even have 1 ounce of courage in me. I was the quietest, shyest child that I knew up until then, up until like my 12 years of life. But I had reflected a lot on our flight back. And one thing I realized that I'd never seen anybody, as courageous as my mother in action. Of course, I read about Rani Lakshmi Bai and all these people. Like, these are historical figures. But my mother really sort of became like a heroine for me. Like, it's something for her. Maybe she doesn't think of it like that because it was just something she had to do. She did it. But for me, it was very eye opening because by that time, I had very good exposure of how my dad operated, and because I was a very observant child, how other men operated. And to do what my mother did, it is really like, I mean, she literally became and remains my heroine. Like, if you can, I like, I have role models, but like, my mom is my heroine. So I realized that I have to be courageous. So I came home and I just made a resolve, and it just literally happened overnight. So next time I will start 13.0. So I will tell you how I transformed myself overnight into a different person in 13. So I'm over time now, and I will close. So the lesson, it's very obvious. It's the biggest lesson of my life. See, like, you can have all the values in the world. You can have all the goodness in the world. You can have all the dreams or ambition or whatever it is in the world. All of that cannot be executed or implemented if you don't have the courage to live up to those values. There are times when you have to say no. There are times when you have to stand up and fight for yourself. There are times when you have to stand up and fight for others. And without courage, all your values will get like washed away. So you have to have the courage to live up to those values. So so that's what mainly, like, I'm a big Hindu religious history buff, so I find that that's a very big difference between Rama and Krishna. Like, don't kill me on this, but I really feel Lord Krishna also emphasizes on that you have to have the courage to fight for the right thing or for yourself. So that's what I learned. And I'll tell you how I went about doing it. So until then, bye.